I was never the type of man who believed in gut instincts, logic, proof, or facts. That is what I trusted. But on that frigid Friday night, when Jessica walked through the door, I felt it right away. Something within me burst into focus. It was no longer just suspicion. It was certainty. The aroma was the first thing that hit me, not her regular perfume. Something muscular, heavy, with the distinct smell of booze and sweat. She wasn't intoxicated, but she had been drinking, and she hadn't been alone anywhere. Her hair was a bit too flawless, as if she had straightened it in the car before getting inside, and her lipstick was a shade deeper than what she often wore for girls. Night was smudged at the corners, followed by her smile. God, that smile. Jessica smiled as if she'd just won the lotto. The eyes are blurry with satisfaction. She did not notice me standing there at first. She gently closed the door, humming beneath her breath. She swayed her hips as she slipped off her coat. She pulled out her phone and rapidly typed something with her thumbs before looking up and freezing. I was waiting, arms crossed, silent. I am staring right at her. Her smile faded briefly before she reapplied it. Oh. Hello, babe, she stated. Too casual, too smooth. I didn't expect you'd still be awake. She was testing me and waiting for a reaction. If I played dumb, she'd relax. If I pressed too hard, she'd spin a falsehood so tight that I'd struggle to separate it. But I wasn't playing anymore. Who is he? My voice was too calm. Jessica blinked. What a breathy laugh. Faust? What exactly are you talking about? I moved closer. Try again. She rolled her eyes and tossed her phone on the counter with a scoff. Oh my God, are we really doing this? I went out with the gals. Nathan, if you don't trust me, text Hannah. She was good. Smooth. Too bad I was better. I took my own phone from my pocket and turned it toward her. Her expression did not change, but I noticed a small tensing in her shoulders as she swallowed a little too hard. Because there was a photo on my screen from less than an hour ago. Jessica was sitting in a dimly lit restaurant, leaning in close to a man I did not recognize. His hand rested on her thigh. Her lips parted in a way that I was all too familiar with. She smiled. The same damn smile. Jessica was silent for quite some time. Her mind was busy, calculating, looking for a way out. I allowed her. I was curious what she might choose. Finally, she scoffed again. Seriously? Are you stalking me now? It was her move. Deflection. Pathetic. The wrong answer. I reached behind me and grabbed a folder from the kitchen counter, then dropped it on the table between us. The sound was sharp, final. Jessica's gaze flickered downward. Divorce papers are already signed. My time has come. Her face had lost its color. What the hell is this? I did not blink. You have 5 minutes to sign them and exit. Jessica's mask slipped, and for the first time since she walked in, her mouth opened and closed. I seen something flash in her eyes. Fear, panic. Good. She wasn't expecting this, and she certainly didn't expect what happened next. The front door slammed open behind her, making a loud crash. Jessica swung around, shocked, just as another woman entered, the dark-haired, tall woman pissed off her lover's wife. And just like that, Jessica's pristine little world started to burn. Jessica turned ghostly white. Her breath caught, and for the first time, she appeared actually terrified. The woman standing at the doorway was more than just angry. She was fuming. Her dark eyes focused on Jessica, like a predator spotting wounded prey. Well, 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 the woman murmured, entering without hesitation. You did not expect me, homewrecker. Jessica snapped her head toward me. Her lips opened slightly as if she were attempting to figure out what was going on. She didn't just get caught. She was trapped. I crossed my arms, leaned back against the counter, and watched her squirm. Who in the heck are you? Jessica finally spit. Her voice shook slightly. The woman's lips twisted into a grin, but her gaze remained icy. "I'm Vanessa, and you've been screwing my husband." Jessica flinched. Her entire body jerked as if she'd been slapped. What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice losing the smug confidence she attempted to maintain. "This is ridiculous." Vanessa gave a gloomy, humorless laugh. Then she took her phone out of her purse, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it towards Jessica. A video of Jessica and her hubby. Jessica was trapped in a situation that left no room for excuses. I'd previously seen it. Vanessa had texted it to me earlier that evening, just before asking whether I wanted to give our unfaithful spouses a lesson they'd never forget. Jessica's face drained of color so quickly that I thought she may pass out. Her lips shook, her gaze flitting between me and Vanessa, urgently seeking an escape. "I did not see one. I could explain," she muttered, barely audible. Vanessa arched her brow. "Okay, you can explain." "Great, because I'd like to know why my husband's mouth was all over you as you giggled like a damn teenager." She took a step closer, her voice becoming sharper. "Go ahead, Jessica, explain." Jessica's throat bobbed and her hands tightened into fists. This is ridiculous. You're both ganging up on me. Nathan, you can't be serious about listening to this insane girl. Shut." Jessica halted in mid-sentence when I spoke so coldly and definitively. She glanced at me as if she no longer recognized me. Good, because the man who used to adore her had died. "You are done lying," I said with a calm voice. "You're finished playing the victim. You have two alternatives. Sign those papers and get the heck out, or we'll take this public." Jessica's breathing became fast. She looked from me to Vanessa before returning her attention to the papers on the table. "You would not," she whispered. Vanessa smirked. "Try me." Jessica's hand shook when she reached for the pen. For the first time, she realized she had lost, but I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. Jessica's fingers trembled as they hovered above the pen. Her mind raced. I could see it. She was trying to think of a way out, some last-minute maneuver, some falsehood that would turn the situation in her advantage. But not this time. I leaned in slightly, reducing my voice to a calm, conversational tone. "You think I don't understand how this works? Jess, you stall, you cry, you make yourself a victim, then you flip it on me. Tell me." I was distant, and I drove you to this. If it doesn't work, would you threaten me? Jessica's lips formed a tight line. I had pinned her. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Threaten him. See how that works for you?" Jessica snapped. "Shut the hell up!" she shouted and turned on Vanessa, like a cornered animal. "You're just a resentful, insecure wife who can't hold her husband's interest. Maybe if you weren't such a sad smack." Vanessa's palm struck Jessica's cheek so hard that the sound echoed around the room like a whip. Jessica staggered back, eyes wide, hand leaping to her face. For a minute, the only sound in the room was her labored breathing. My stomach should have fallen. I should have felt some pity. But I only felt cold, black contentment. "Try again," Vanessa whispered. Jessica blinked quickly. Her breath came in short spurts and the mask cracked. Her face twisted, wrath flowing from her like a dam cracking. "Do you believe you are punishing me?" she screamed. "I was miserable. I was tired of playing house while you sat on your ass and took me for granted." She turned to me, her voice caustic. "You want to discuss cheating, Nathan? What about the nights you worked late? How about the occasions when you hardly touched me?" I slowly breathed, allowing her words to sink in the air. Then I looked her directly in the eyes. "I have never cheated on you." Her nostrils flared. "You? I never even considered it." I stepped closer. Voice is steady. "And does that kill you? Because that means you can't blame it on me. Jessica, all of this is on you. You lied. You sneaked about. You had him touch and kiss you while I was at home, and I trusted you." Jessica's jaw tightened so hard that I thought she'd fracture a tooth. But she hadn't. Nothing except the truth stared back at her. Vanessa stepped forward, her lips curving into a dangerously pleased expression. "Sign the paperwork, honey, before I get inventive." Jessica seized the pen and let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Fine," she spit. "I will sign your foolish papers. But what do you know, Nathan? You are going to miss me. You believe you are all great and mighty right now, but wait till you're alone in bed, understanding I'm the best thing that has ever happened to you." She threw the pen down on the paper, her signature ripping across the sheet in violent, jagged strokes. She pushed the papers toward me and smiled. Best of luck finding someone better. I picked up the papers, examined them, glanced at her, and then chuckled. Slow love. "Cold, Jessica," I whispered, delicately folding the papers. "You were the worst thing that had ever happened to me." Vanessa's phone buzzed after her smile flickered. She looked at the screen and smirked. "Well, well," she replied. "Guess who just learned about his unfaithful wife?" Jessica's breath caught. Vanessa's husband was on his way, and the night was far from over. Jessica's face had lost its color. Her gaze shifted between Vanessa and me, her breathing irregular, her hands curled into tight fists. For the first time, actual terror appeared on her face. She thought it was over. She assumed that by signing the documents, she would be free to leave and possibly alter the story. Tell her pals that I had overreacted, that she had been stuck in a loveless marriage. She had no choice except to seek consolation elsewhere. But now the man she had been screwing behind my back was about to walk through that door, and he was not going to smile. Vanessa tilted her head, eyes shining. "What's wrong with Jessica Shepherd? You look like you've just seen a ghost." Jessica licked her lips and looked toward the door as if she were calculating how fast she could outrun you. "You did not tell him, did you?" Her voice cracked at the corners. Vanessa lifted her eyebrow. "Oh, honey, I did not just tell him." She held up her phone. "I showed him." Jessica trembled slightly as if the floor had just changed beneath her feet. "You sick, demented bitch!" she shouted and lunged at Vanessa. But I caught her first. I grabbed Jessica's Ahmed swing and yanked her back so forcefully that she almost lost her footing. "Try it," I murmured, my voice dangerously low. "I challenge you." Jessica wiggled in my grip. Her breath came in quick, rapid rushes. "You believe you're quite brilliant, don't you?" she spit. "Do you believe this makes you a decent guy? You're a sad little dude." An automobile drove up outside. The headlights shone through the glass, casting harsh shadows on Jessica's face. Her words died in her throat. Vanessa grinned. "Showtime." Jessica attempted to bolt. I saw it coming before she moved, her body tensed, her gaze moving toward the hallway and the back door. But Vanessa moved faster. She moved in front of her, preventing her escape. Vanessa teased. "You don't get to run, dear. You wanted him. You can now face him." The car door banged outside. Jessica's entire body tightened, followed by footsteps on the porch. Heavy, fast, angry. Jessica spun toward me, her eyes filled with desperation. Vanessa's husband, Jessica's affair partner, appeared in the doorway when the front door burst open. Fists clenched, prepared for battle. The room became silent, thick, suffocating. The kind that comes before an explosion. Vanessa's husband, a tall, broad-shouldered guy with keen, furious eyes, waited in the doorway, his chest rising and falling with long, deliberate breaths. But there was nothing controlled about the way his fists squeezed and his jaw trembled as if he was barely holding himself together. Jessica froze for the first time that evening. She appeared honestly terrified, not nervous, not embarrassed, afraid. "Mark," she muttered, her voice shaking. Mark took a step inside and closed the door firmly behind him. His knuckles were white, his nostrils flared, and his gaze burned through. "Jessica, you," he said with a hushed voice, dangerous. "You are a filthy, dishonest, backstabbing person." Jessica flinched like if he had just punched her in the stomach. She turned to me, her eyes wide with fear, as if she expected me to save her, as if I were still the spouse who would intervene. Calm everything down, smooth things out. I did not move. She did it. She earned it. Jessica gulped hard. Mark, I can explain. Mark's laughing was chilly, unfunny, and razor-pointed. Oh, yes, you can. You can explain why you were in my bed. Why did you let me kiss you? Make contact with you? Whisper to my wife. His voice cracked, and for a split second, I believed he was going to punch the wall while my wife was at home, relying on me. You can explain it. Jessica's breathing was rapid and uneven, and her fingers twitched as if she wanted to grab for him. Fix it. But she was out of tricks. I was not thinking, Mark. Oh, no. Vanessa cut in, arms crossed, enjoying this. You were thinking a lot. You were thinking about how amazing it felt and how exciting it was to sneak about behind our backs. Her eyes clouded. Don't try to act like this was a mistake. Jessica's face twisted. Oh, shut up. Vanessa, you were not even a good wife for him. Mark snapped in one rapid move. He gripped Jessica's wrist, not harming or damaging her, but simply stopping her cold. Do you think this is about Vanessa? He snarled, his tone dangerously low. Do you believe this is about anything other than you being a filthy, selfish, uncaring bitch? Jessica opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Mark leaned closer, his gaze scorching into hers. You made me feel foolish. You played me. You've wrecked us. His voice trembled with wrath. And I swear to God, Jessica, you will regret this for the rest of your miserable life. Jessica pulled her wrist free, falling back with strained breaths. I did not mean no. Mark's voice sliced through the room like a knife. You meant everything. And then, without saying anything else, he turned and stared directly at me. His wrath was not for me. It was not even for Vanessa. It was entirely for her. I hope you ruin her. He spoke to me. His voice was low, forceful, and dead serious. I hope you burn her world to the ground. And with that, he turned and walked away. Jessica faltered, staring at the door as if her one opportunity of escape had suddenly vanished. I exhaled gently, noting how her body trembled and her hands shook as she realized it was finished. No, Mark, not me. No one to lie to. There is no one to save her. She was alone, and I had never seen anything so fulfilling in my life. Jessica wavered slightly, like if she'd been hit by a truck. Her mouth opened and closed for the first time since she walked through that door. She had nothing to say. Vanessa smirked. Arms are still crossed, watching Jessica dissolve, like if she had been waiting for this moment for years. She mused, tilting her head. Guess the monies are gone, sweetheart? Jessica's head snapped toward her, and for a brief moment I noticed it. Pure hatred. Not for shame. Not guilty. Hatred. Because Jessica was not sorry. Jessica was angry. She was upset that she had been caught. She was angry because she had been backed into a corner with no way out. Angry because she no longer had control. Vanessa, I hope you are pleased. Jessica spit. You've ruined my life. Vanessa blinked. Then she laughed, a deep, satisfied chuckle that was shockingly harsh. Even I could feel it in my chest. Oh, sweetie. Vanessa purred as she moved closer. I did not damage your life. She leaned closer and spoke the following words as if they were a promise. You did it all by yourself. Jessica's eyes flashed with rage, and I could see it now. The panic beneath, the knowledge that she was alone. And then I noticed something else. Jessica's eyes flickered to mine, and I knew precisely what was about to happen. She inhaled sharply and straightened her shoulders. Her expression suddenly changed. The wrath is gone, and the panic has been buried. I saw something I had fell for numerous times before. Softness, vulnerability, regret. and I knew it was her final play. "Nathan," she whispered. Her voice was frail and wavering. "Please." Vanessa released a sarcastic gasp. "Oh my God. Are you crying?" Jessica ignored her, her gaze focused on me. You don't need to do this," she whispered. "I acknowledge that I made a mistake. I know I harmed you, but you aren't like them." A real tear slipped down her cheek. "You're a good man, Nathan. Kind man. And her voice broke. "I miss us." There it was. The Jessica I once adored, the woman who could convince me of anything. For years, I'd been the fool who believed every lie. Not anymore. I made a steady, purposeful step forward, meeting her stare straight on. Then I smiled. But it was not kind. It was the smile of a man who had finished playing her game. "Oh, Jessica," I murmured. "You really don't understand, do you?" She blinked. "And Nathan, I do not love you anymore." The words struck her like a gunshot. She flinched, her lips parted, and her breath caught in her throat. "And I wasn't finished. I do not care about your tears. I do not care about your regrets." My voice sounded low. "Finally, remain calm. You're nothing to me now." Jessica staggered back as if I had physically hit her. Vanessa gave out a slow whistle. Damn, that was horrible. Jessica's face twisted. The mask shattered again. The real her clawed back. "Fine," she shouted, her voice full of hatred. "Do you think you are a big man now? Do you think you are superior than me?" I sighed gently and shook my head. "No, Jessica, I know who I am." Her nostrils flared, her hands curled into fists. But she knew it was over. One final furious stare at Vanessa. She grabbed her purse, pivoted on her heel, and stormed for the door. Vanessa's phone buzzed again just as she approached it. She peered at the television, then smiled. "Wow," she replied, raising her gaze to Jessica. "Guess what, sweetheart? It appears that your supervisor has only recently learned about your secret affair." Jessica froze in mid-step, her breath caught. Then she swung around, eyes wild with dread. And for the first time all night, I saw something that made me truly happy. Jessica finally realized what true repercussions were like. Jessica spun around so swiftly that her hair snapped over her shoulder. "What the hell did you say?" Vanessa giggled and held up her phone. "Oh, honey, you heard me. Your employer knows everything." Jessica's face had lost its color. "You are lying!" Vanessa arched her brow. "Oh, do you want to check your email?" Jessica's fingers trembled and her entire body tensed up, as if she was about to collapse. I could see the gears churning in her thoughts, a desperate attempt to locate an out. Her voice sounded weaker now. "How?" Vanessa tilted her head and pretended to think. "Oh, I do not know. Perhaps someone emailed screenshots to everyone in your work. Maybe someone forwarded some heated texts between you and my spouse. Perhaps someone has attached a couple vids." She shrugged. "Who is to say?" Jessica staggered backward. Her mouth opened and closed. Her breath was shallow. "You can't." "Oh, I did." Vanessa cut in effortlessly, and based on how quickly he responded, I would assume you're officially unemployed. Jessica lost it. "You insane bitch." She shouted and sprang at Vanessa, but she was prepared. She moved aside barely in time, but Jessica's momentum knocked her into the coffee table. The thunderous thump of her knees against the hardwood floor was music to my ears. "Jesus, Jessica," I mumbled, shaking my head. "Are you really going out like this?" She jumped up, breathing rapidly and shivering with wrath and panic. "Do you think this is funny?" she screamed. "Do you think wrecking my career is a game?" Vanessa smirked. "No, honey. I believe it's karma." Jessica gulped for air, her chest heaving. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and began hurriedly typing. Then her face crumpled. Her eyes glazed over as she stared at the screen, her lips twitching. I didn't need to read what was written there. I already knew she was finished. After a few seconds of stunned stillness, her fingers relaxed, and the phone dropped from her clutches, dropping on the floor with a gentle thud. I took a slow stride forward. That awful Jessica pulled her head up, her eyes flaming with rage. "I will sue you," she spit. "I'll make sure of both of you." "Oh, Jessica, quit up," I interrupted. She flinched. I exhaled and rubbed my temples. "You cheated. You lied. You did it to yourself." My voice seemed unusually calm now. And the best part? You do not get to play the victim. Not this time. Her eyes glossed over, and her lips parted as if she wanted to utter something. She would do anything to get out of this. However, there was nothing left. Her marriage has ended. Her lover has left. Her job is no more. She had spent so much effort establishing a second life. I thought she was untouchable. Everything was on fire now. Jessica lurched back toward the door, her breath coming out unevenly. She went for the handle as if she were in a dream, her entire body collapsing under the weight of what had just happened. Vanessa leaned against the counter, watching her with amusement. "Do not forget your purse, sweetie," she called. "I don't want you to lose anything else tonight." Jessica hesitated briefly before grabbing it without saying anything. I looked at her one more time, soaking in the sight of the woman I had once loved, the lady who had ruined everything we had for cheap thrills and falsehoods. I no longer felt anything for her, and that was the nicest thing of all. She lingered at the entrance, her back to us. I wondered if she tried to say anything, make a final desperate plea. But then she went away, and for the first time in years, I could breathe freely. The door slammed shut behind Jessica, removing every ounce of power she had over me for a few long seconds. The home remained silent. No yelling, no gaslighting, and no phony apologies. Nothing. Just peace. I breathed gently, allowing the gravity of the situation settle in. It was over. Really? Truly. Over. Vanessa then laughed, a low, slow, and very satisfying sound. "Well," she responded, pushing off the counter. "That was fun." I let out a brief breath and shook my head. This was ridiculous. Vanessa shrugged. "It felt like justice to me." I smirked. "Remind me not to get on your wrong side." She grinned. "You're a smart dude." I ran my hand through my hair as I glanced at the divorce papers, which were still on the table with Jessica's angry, jagged signature ripped across the bottom. For the first time in months, possibly years, I felt liberated. Vanessa must have noticed as she raised an eyebrow, so she asked, "What now?" A good question, because all I had expected from my life had been shattered in the course of a single night. And yet I didn't feel lost. I felt lighter. I looked to Vanessa, who was looking at me with the same amused, sharp-eyed gaze. "Drinks," I offered. She smirked. You read my mind. We grabbed our coats and walked out the door, leaving nothing but ashes. The night air was crisp, and the chill stung on my skin as Vanessa and I went out onto the porch. Jessica's car remained parked at the curb, the engine running and the exhaust curling into the air, but she did not move. She simply sat there. Her fists grasped the steering wheel so fiercely that her knuckles became white. Her head was slightly leaned downward, and her hair fell over her face. She was disintegrating. Good. Vanessa observed two things slowing her down. "Is she waiting for a spectacular farewell?" she mused. I let out a quick breath. Does not matter, and it did not. Jessica's breakdown, her remorse, and the feeling that she had finally failed. None of that was my concern anymore. Vanessa smirked. "Damn, I enjoy the new version of you." I chuckled. "I guess I do, too." We got to my car, and I unlocked it with a rapid press of my key fob as I opened the door. Jessica's automobile lurched forward. I hardly had time to respond before she sped away from the curb, her tires screeching against the tarmac. She didn't simply drive off. She peeled out the flaming rubber. The engine roars, flying down the street like a bat out of hell. Vanessa whistled softly. That's one way to exit. I noticed Jessica's taillights fade into the distance. She will be back. Vanessa tilted her head. Do you honestly think so? I nodded. Women like her, they never leave softly. Vanessa hummed, amused. Let's hope she's wise enough not to return while I'm still around. I gave her a perplexed look as I climbed into the driver's seat. Are you going to stick around? Vanessa climbed into the passenger seat, smirking as she secured her seatbelt. You tell me. I laughed and shook my head as I started the car. Let's see where the night leads us. She grinned. Now you're talking. And with that, I pressed the gas, driving onward without even looking in the rearview mirror. We pulled into a dimly lit bar downtown where the music was just loud enough to drown out your thoughts, but not so loud that communication was difficult. It was just what I needed, a spot to sit, drink, and let reality sink in. Vanessa sat onto the bar stool next to me and ordered whiskey, neat as if it were second nature. I smirked and raised an eyebrow. No nonsense, she chuckled. Not my style. The bartender turned to face me. How about you? I considered it for a second. The old me would have ordered a beer, something light and safe. But after the night, I'd drank whiskey, I explained. Neat. Vanessa gave me an approving gaze at a boy. The drinks arrived, and for a time we sat there, sipping in silence. The weight of the night lingered between us, yet it wasn't overwhelming. If anything, it was cleaning. Vanessa swirled her glass to watch the amber liquid move. So she eventually said, How do you feel? Exhaled, as if I had just walked away from a car accident, shaken but alive. She smirked, relieved. I considered that, really thought about it. Then I nodded. Yes, I admit, more than I expected. Vanessa clinked her glass on mine, symbolizing new beginnings. Then I let the words to settle in my thoughts, rolling them around. A fresh start. It sounded so exotic, so impossible, only hours ago. But now, it seemed like the only thing that made sense. We drank, we talked. The talk flowed smoothly and organically, as if we had known each other for longer than a single shared loss. She was a smart, quick-witted woman who didn't waste words or try to be someone she wasn't. And for the first time in years, I wasn't seated next to a lie. I wasn't sitting across from someone who considered me expendable. I was just there in the moment, which felt fantastic. Vanessa's phone suddenly buzzed. She looked at it and rolled her eyes. Speak about the devil. I arched my brow. Jessica? No. My hubby. She smirked and tossed the phone on the bar. Can you guess how many missed calls he has from her? I chuckled. At least 10. She corrected 15 and began counting. I shake my head. I told you she would be back. Vanessa leaned in slightly, her words sounding almost menacing. Let her come back. She swirled the remainder of her whiskey. She will only embarrass herself more. I smirked. She shrugged. You truly are ruthless. Her eyes gleamed. Cheating does this to a person. I couldn't disagree with it. The bartender stopped by again, wrinkling his brow at our empty drinks. Another round. Vanessa looked at me, waiting. I reflected on the past, the misery I had just been through, and the freedom I was experiencing for the first time in years. I met her gaze. Yes, I mentioned another round. Just like that. I let go. The second round went down more easily than the first. Perhaps it was the alcohol. Perhaps it was because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. No falsehoods, no manipulation, and no phony affection, masking and betrayal, simply wonderful whiskey and better company. Vanessa leaned on the bar, her elbow up, and gave me a knowing smirk. So, Nathan, when do you think she will crack? I exhaled and shook my head. Jessica? She hummed. She's in free fall right now. No husband, no affair, partner, job, or control. The question is, how long will it be before she completely spirals? I gave a quiet chuckle while swirling the whiskey in my glass. If I know Jessica, she's already planning something. Vanessa smirked. Do you believe she will try to win you back? I nodded. 100%. Vanessa breathed deeply. God, they're so predictable. She was not mistaken. Jessica was not done. Women like her. They never completely accepted that they had lost. They always convinced themselves that they could change the conclusion and talk their way out of trouble. Make you forget. I was not going to forget. The bartender passed by and dropped off another round without asking. Vanessa raised her glass slightly. 2. I pondered it, and then the answer occurred to me. It is very clear that I will never be that dumb again. She grinned. I'll drink to that. We drank the whiskey and fell into a comfortable stillness. The pub surrounding us was alive with low laughter, clinking glasses, and a band playing an old rock tune in the background. It was a Friday night, and for once, I wasn't worried about who my wife was with. Vanessa breathed and looked down at her phone again. He still texts her, by the way. I raised an eyebrow. Your husband thinks. She smirked as she corrected. Nonetheless, I believe he is trying to explain himself, perhaps even salvage items. She locked her screen and threw the phone on the bar. Pathetic. I chuckled. He is desperate. Clearly. She murmured and shook her head. Then she looked to me, her gaze becoming intrigued. So, how about you? I frowned. What about me? Vanessa bent her head slightly and studied me as if she could see through me. Nathan, you're officially free, divorced, no more falsehoods, no more gaslighting, no more Jessica. What happens next? The question hit me harder than I expected because I hadn't given it much thought yet. For so long, my existence had revolved on survival. Surviving the marriage, surviving the falsehoods, surviving betrayal. And now that it was all over, what the hell happened next? I exhaled. I honestly have no idea. Vanessa smirked. Isn't that the finest part? I blinked. What? She leaned in slightly, her voice changing to something almost secretive. You can do whatever you want right now. There's no wife to answer to. You will no longer be burdened by a bad marriage. You get to start afresh, and believe me. She took a slow sip from her drink. There's nothing better than realizing you no longer know anything about anyone. I let the words sink in, swirling them around in my head. She was correct. For the first time in years, I was not trapped. I wasn't waiting for anyone to change. I wasn't attempting to repair something that was never intended to be saved. I was free, and suddenly that concept no longer scared me. I smirked and raised my glass to whatever the heck I wanted. Vanessa clinked her glass to mine, smiling. You are now getting it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. The whiskey burned, but in the finest possible manner. It reminded me that I was still alive, breathing, and in control of my own damn life. Vanessa reclined back in her chair and stretched gently, her smirk never wavering. So, Nathan, what would your older self be doing right now? I thought about it. The old me. He'd be home, sitting on that awful couch, waiting for Jessica to return home from one of her phony girls' nights. He'd be staring at his phone, pondering whether to text her again and wondering why she hadn't responded. He'd be swallowing the nagging gut instinct that something was awry. He convinced himself that he was crazy for doubting her. That version of myself is dead and buried. I exhaled and placed down my empty glass, knowing that I wouldn't be here. Vanessa nodded. Satisfied? Good response. The bar had begun to dwindle out. It was becoming late, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the familiar dread seeping in. There was no wife to return home to. No stress awaited me at the entrance. There is no sinking feeling in my gut, only the night and freedom. Vanessa looked at her phone again, shaking her head. Jesus. Jessica is still blowing up my ex's phone. She snorted. Perhaps she thought they were meant to be. I laughed at how much he regrets his decision today. Absolutely. She smirked and tilted her head slightly. And Jessica? Do you think she regrets it yet? I reasoned that Jessica was not the sort to feel guilt. Not true remorse, just regret. The selfish kind. The kind that resulted from losing control. Oh, yes, she will regret it much more tomorrow. I said, once reality sets in. Vanessa chuckled. And how about you? Any regrets? I stared her directly in the eyes. Not a single one. Her smirk widened at a boy for a while. We just sat there. Two people who had been tricked, lied to, and played for fools, yet had emerged sharper, smarter, and entirely unconcerned about the carnage behind us. Vanessa finally stretched and grabbed her coat. Okay, divorce buddy. I believe that's enough whiskey-fueled life insights for one night. I smirked. That's correct. We went outside together, the night air sharp against my skin. My car was parked across the street, and hers was only a few spots down. She turned to me, her eyes gleaming. So I think you'll be fine. I let out a deep breath and looked up at the sky. For the first time in years, I wasn't faking an answer. Yes, I said, and I believe I will. Vanessa grinned while shaking her head. Good. And hey, if Jessica ever attempts to crawl back? I grinned. No chance in hell. She smirked. Damn right. She offered me a false salute and then went to her car, getting inside without saying anything else. No lingering glances or awkward goodbyes. Only two persons had survived the same war and lived to tell the story. I climbed into my own car, grasping the wheel, allowing everything that had transpired in the previous 24 hours to sink in. And then I drove away, rolled down the windows, and turned up the music as loud as possible. I didn't look back because the past wasn't an issue anymore. Here's the next story. Christmas was no longer important to me. It'll never be the same. I lost my wife, Mary, earlier this year. Even though it was not unexpected, it still hurts. After 2 years of chemotherapy and dozens of doctor visits and hospitalizations, Mary and I grew close. People have always stated that you don't realize what you have until you lose it, and it was true. We hadn't gotten along very well in the final few years before she developed sick, but we had stayed together regardless. Now that I think about it, it's possible that Mary's health played a significant role. We were both 56 when she died. We have a son, a daughter, and 4 grandchildren who mourn her greatly. We did not have a perfect marriage. It was actually quite the opposite. We tried for 35 years to make it work. In my younger years, I used to go out with the boys while leaving Mary at home with the child. She stated that after both children began school, she would seek employment and pursue her own interests. We battled a lot over her job, but she didn't listen to me. For the most of our marriage, love seemed to take a back seat. I'll admit that I was immature and flirted with several women. Usually after drinking too much, I grew envious when Mary talked to other men, including ones we knew. We seemed to bicker about everything, but especially while she was out with her friends. I was terrified she would cheat on me and I wouldn't know how to handle it. Many years ago, I got intoxicated and had 2 one-night stands. I know she found out about them from my ex-friend Bill. He informed her about them so that he might try to get into her pants. She told me what Bill said to her. I called him a liar. I went to his place and beat the crap out of him. His wife, Sally, contacted the police, and I was arrested. It happened a long time ago, and Mary persuaded Bill to dismiss the accusations in favor of our child. Until the day my wife died. I'm sure she believed Bill instead of me. Do I regret the mistakes I made in my younger years? Of course I do. However, you cannot turn back the clock, and there are no do-overs. She began hanging out with the females throughout that period in our lives. Every few months. I followed her multiple times without her knowledge, and I never once caught her cheating on me. Most of her pals were married with children. Also, I think they just wanted a night out, away from their husbands and children. Her sister Dorothy, whom I truly admire, generally accompanied her. She also attended a lot of feminine parties involving Tupperware, baking supplies, and purses. God knows how many of them she attended. Our relationship was one of those on and off again situations. I believe we were a regular married couple at the time. Our family comes first. We made every effort to attend all of the school activities and competitions, as well as the graduations and marriages of the children. Then we started with the grandchildren. When we initially married, our love lives were like two rabbits, and neither of us were extremely experienced or well-informed. We did have some extremely fantastic days. Mary usually dressed up and looked lovely after celebrations such as weddings and anniversaries. I was always proud to be with her. I wanted to inform all the guys that stared at her tough, shitty buddy. I'm going to take her home and avoid her like the plague. She's entirely mine. Needless to say, I considered it, but never said it aloud. Mary would frequently ask me why I was smiling following these experiences. I've always got along with Mary's family. Her parents treated me like a son, and her sister Dorothy was perhaps the only lady I cared about other than Mary. They looked so similar, and I'd be dishonest if I didn't say so. I've thought about Dorothy a lot throughout the years. I don't know how she felt, but I believe we had a connection. Neither of us pursued it, however. Dorothy married Howard and had 2 children of her own. The 4 of us spent a lot of time together, and because the kids were all close in age, they grew up to be good friends and cousins. Mary and I lived a very boring life. She took care of the inside, while I handled the exterior responsibilities. We would bicker or argue about little issues, but I believe we genuinely loved one another. We just weren't big on displaying it. After the one-night encounters, I realized Mary didn't fully trust me. If I spoke to a woman, she would generally make a witty remark to me, and I would respond with something I would later regret. I honestly didn't mess around with anyone once I was locked up. But I guess I lost Mary's trust and never really regained it. When we went to gatherings, I would frequently sit and watch her. She seemed to only flirt when she knew I was observing. She knew I had a strong, jealous streak and would attempt to press my buttons. The problem was that I was unable to understand what she was saying based on her body language. She must have gotten carried away at a New Year's party once. I went to the restroom, and when I returned, she was dancing with someone she worked with. All I knew about him was that his name was Rob, and he was divorced. I didn't care much for the guy. And as he slid his hand down to Mary's, an asterisk, she glanced surprised and over to me before pushing his hand away. I pounced on him like a cat on a mouse. I grabbed him from behind and threw him on the floor. I hit him once before being taken away from him. If you touch my wife again, I will murder you. I told the best. Mary was crying, and she went to the ladies' room with her girlfriend. Rob got up and went to the men's restroom to clean up. I did make his mouth bleed. Nobody was going to bring charges, so I was asked to go. I waited for Mary to come out, and she seemed ashamed. As we left, "How could you do that? I have to work with these folks. What on earth drove you to do that?" "I'm really humiliated," Mary admitted. "How did I feel watching you flirt with him as Astor as Cole and allow him to place his hand on yours, asterisk?" I replied that I had things under control. I was just going to push his hand back up to my waist and avoid making a scene. It was silent in the car until Mary muttered, "I apologize." I did not intend for that to happen. "Jim, I adore you and would never purposely hurt you. Will you forgive me? Please stop trying to make me jealous. I will always be there to protect you and will never stand by and let any man to grope you." That night we experienced some of the most amazing love ever. I believe it brought us closer and helped us understand each other. Something tells me she told her sister Dorothy about what happened, including the love. It was exactly how Dorothy looked at me the next time I saw her. It was almost as if I could read her thoughts. Update. Life moved on, and everything soon returned to normal. Mary did mention the Astros. Cole apologized to her at work, and she swore to keep away from him. Christmas at our house was always a treat. Mary would always go above and above for the children. I would tell her she was spending too much money, but she never listened. I told her that I would be responsible for putting up all of the outside decorations. I didn't dislike it, and the kids usually assisted me. Christmas morning was always a huge deal in our house. We opened presents, and Mary went into the kitchen to prepare a large breakfast of bacon, eggs, sausage, hash browns, biscuits, and gravy. Even after our children were grown, Mary and I would sit in front of our tree on Christmas mornings and open our few gifts. Then the phone would ring and the children and grandchildren would say they were all coming over for breakfast. It's funny how you recall these amazing moments. I suppose in the future, recollections are all we have left. When Mary got cancer, I promised her I'd be there for her. I meant it, and I was there every day for her chemo appointments, as well as sitting with her all night when she was admitted to the hospital. I did it out of love for her and guilt for the pain I had caused her. I was doing my best to make things up to her. Dorothy's husband, Howard, died from a heart attack the same year Mary discovered she had cancer. They were there for one another. Dorothy was 2 years older than Mary. Dorothy's children resided out of state and traveled home for their father's burial. Throughout the funeral service, Mary remained by Dorothy's side, holding her hand. Mary was concerned about Dorothy being alone after her children had left for home. Mary asked if I would undertake the man of the home chores to assist Dorothy. It wasn't an issue, and I was glad to do it because she lived only a street away. Dorothy worked in an insurance agency which allowed her to stay occupied. I did stop by to mow the lawn or shovel the snow, depending on the season. Dorothy came to our house every evening after Mary started therapy to spend time with her sister. On the days Mary received chemotherapy, Dorothy would prepare our dinner so that Mary could rest. The two sisters sat down and chatted a lot about their childhood and how they matured. They were so much alike. I tried my best to leave them alone and let them speak. Dorothy was bearing her husband's death fairly well. Her children would phone her frequently. They even asked her to relocate out of state to where they resided so she would not be alone. I happened to overhear one of her discussions one day. "Honey, I am not alone. I have Mary and Jim here. I am getting along nicely. Mary and I have always been close. She needs me. We enjoy reminiscing about old times. She has both good and bad days." Dorothy would then continue after her daughter had finished speaking. "Jim is a godsend. He comes over to help me with any home repairs. He is familiar with the yard and completes whatever tasks are required. I adore the man. Mary is fortunate to have him." I noticed a smile on her face. She didn't realize I could see and hear her. Mary gradually deteriorated. She was transported to a hospital. Dorothy and my children, Mark and Susan, were there with me. We were told that Mary wanted to see each of us individually. We knew it was over when they summoned us all in. The youngsters entered first and exited crying. I entered next. "Jim, I love you. I want you to know that while we had some hard times, we also had a lot of happy ones." She gave a small smile. "Thank you for being there for me. I understand it wasn't always simple for you either." She paused before carrying on. "Jim, I need you to take care of Dorothy for me. I love her with all of my heart and need to know you will be there for her. I promise to help her as much as I can." I responded with tears in my eyes. "Something I never told you about when we initially started dating. Dorothy claimed she had a crush on you and that if I didn't marry you, she would. I realize it was a long time ago, but I wanted you to know. I love you, Jim." I kissed her, and she begged me to call Dorothy to come inside. I knew I had tears in my eyes, but I tried to stay strong. I waited in the hallway. After visiting with Dorothy, we all returned inside, and I held her hand as she breathed her last. I couldn't hold back any longer, and we all burst into tears. We left the hospital after we had our composers. I wasn't shocked, but I was at a loss for what to do now. Back when both my parents and Mary's parents died, Mary was the stronger of the two. They handled all of the arrangements. Dorothy assured me not to worry. She'd be there for me. Dorothy was present and assisted Susan and me with all of the funeral arrangements. I'm not sure what I would have done without her. I contacted our lawyer. Thank God, we have a will. Dorothy informed us what to do after her husband died unexpectedly. In the months following Mary's funeral, Dorothy and the kids came over to assist me sort through Mary's belongings. They made sure the grandchildren had trinkets to remember their granny by. Susan and Mark's wife, Christy, collected the majority of the jewelry and other womanly items. It felt strange that the most of the good clothes didn't fit the girls but were Dorothy's size. I told her to take them. I knew Mary would want to have them. Furthermore, even though the clothes were pricey, the younger girls dressed differently. It was quickly approaching Thanksgiving. Dorothy accepted an invitation to her daughter's home and planned to attend. I will miss her, but I promised her I would keep an eye on her property. She would be away for a week. Mark and his wife, Christy, asked me over for Thanksgiving dinner. They also invited Susan and her family over. It's the first time I can recall not having Thanksgiving dinner without Mary preparing it. Thank goodness Mary taught Susan and Christy how to cook. The food was excellent, but I know everyone still missed Mary. Perhaps it was time for the next generation to take over. Christy gave me enough leftovers to last me a week because Dorothy wouldn't be there to make sure I ate properly. Everyone laughed, but after thinking about it, I realized they were correct. Dorothy looked after me. I was glad to see Dorothy return home. I informed her that I was weary of turkey and invited her to dinner. As we ate spaghetti and meatballs, we discussed Christmas. I told her Mary did the majority of the shopping, and I wasn't sure what to get the family. She explained what she did. She gave all the grown-ups gift cards to their favorite stores, allowing them to buy whatever they wished. Because the grandchildren enjoy opening presents, she compiled a list of what they wanted and purchased some of them. I asked her if she wanted to go shopping with me, especially since I wasn't the best shopper. She agreed, and Christy and Susan gave me a list of ideas for what to purchase the kids. I set a $200 limit for each. It's also the value of the gift cards I gave each adult. Some people would say that was a lot of money, but my family is all I have, and it was most likely less than Mary would have spent. Dorothy and I went shopping 2 Saturdays in a row, and I bought the kids gifts and picked up the gift cards. After we were done shopping, I asked Dorothy if she wanted to go to the movies. She chuckled, thinking it would be fun. I bought us each a huge popcorn and a drink. The popcorn and soda cost more than the film. I can't remember the last time I went to the movies, but it wasn't more than $20. I was not planning to put up the decorations this year. I just didn't feel the Christmas spirit. Susan came over and said, "Daddy, we have traditions. And just because Mom is gone doesn't mean our traditions are over. We all miss Mom. Mark said he'd help you with the outside lights. The kids and I will decorate the inside and set up the tree." I knew she was correct, but even though I was not in the mood, I went along for the sake of family tradition. I asked the children about Christmas morning. Susan stated that after their family opened their presents, they came over. The children were able to open their gifts. I got them, and then we'd eat our regular breakfast. Dorothy stopped by a few days before Christmas and informed me that her children had invited her to spend Christmas with them. "Dorothy, you should spend the holidays with your family. Mark, Susan, and their families will both be present. We'll try to have our typical Christmas. I wish you a Merry Christmas." She gave me a strong hug and a soft kiss. I realized we hadn't kissed in a long time, possibly not since New Year's. I said nothing as she went. It was Christmas Eve, and I was home alone. After wrapping the gifts for the children and grandchildren, I poured myself a drink and sat in front of the Christmas tree, which was decorated with a few presents to be opened the following day. It was then that I realized I had neglected to give Dorothy her gift. I had gone out to buy her an emerald necklace and matching earrings. I had them wrap it for me and simply put it under the tree. I was sitting there alone, drinking my drink, when I heard a knock at the door. I had to wonder who in the asterisk L was coming by at 9 p.m. on Christmas Eve. "So, Jim, will you allow me in, or will I have to stand outside in the cold?" My mouth dropped open when I noticed Dorothy standing there. I apologized, and she came inside. I needed to hug her. I couldn't help it. That is how all of us guys are. I remarked I thought you were going to spend the holidays with your family, she said. I called my daughter to let her know I wouldn't be coming. This year, I informed her that I was going to spend the holidays with you. To be honest, I felt like I was intruding on my daughter and her family, and I did not want to be away from you for so long. She smiled as Mary used to and continued. I know I'm not Mary and I'm an older woman, but I'm also lonely. Jim. Besides, I told Mary that I would take care of you. And how can I accomplish this if I'm not present? I couldn't think of anyone living who I wanted to spend more time with. Because she was nearly 60 years old, some may find it strange to describe her as lovely or gorgeous, but she was to me. She looked excellent for her age. I'm not sure why I did it, but I bent down, kissed her, and began to apologize. She said, "Do not apologize. I wanted you to kiss me, but I needed to think it out and talk to you first." I took her coat and urged her to sit. I asked if she wanted a drink and brought her a glass of wine. I reached under the tree and handed her the present I'd bought her. I told her I'd give it to her the day she departed, but I forgot. She opened it, smiled, and thanked me. When we were shopping, I noticed you looking at it and went back to buy it for you. This time, she gave me a light kiss. "Okay, it is time to talk." She then began explaining things to me. "Jim, you're aware that I've always cared for you. Mary knew it as well. She told me. Did she tell you? You understand how close Mary and I were. Jim, she loved you. She was deeply in love with you. You also know that she never truly forgave you for the affairs until her dying days." "Yes, Jim. I am fully aware of the situation. Mary and I did not keep secrets from each other. She told me you did everything you could to make it up to her, but she couldn't let it go. I tried several times to convince her to forgive you, but she simply refused. I adored my husband, Howard. He was a wonderful and loyal man. We lived a wonderful life together. I will always remember him. He will always hold a place in my heart. Just like Mary, you'll always have one in yours. But Jim, I've always loved you. I know you felt something too. But you belong to Mary. I would never hurt her. As you are aware, Mary spoke with us prior to her passing. Jim, Mary was concerned about you being alone. The last thing she said to me was, Dorothy, take care of Jim. I know he loves you as well. He's a good man, but I'm afraid he won't succeed on his own. He needs a lot of love and attention. He's stubborn as an ox and refuses to listen to you. But he's a wonderful man. You also need him. Dorothy, I was in tears again. Damn, grown men shouldn't cry. That's about all I do now. I looked at Dorothy and said Mary was correct. You know, I've always had feelings for you, aside from Mary. You are the only person I truly care for. I asked Dorothy if she was going to stay the night. She looked at me and said, Jim, I will stay forever if you want me to. Tears welled up in my eyes as I kissed her. I told her it was fine with me. Deep down, I knew Mary was fine with this. Later, after Mary died, I discovered that she and Dorothy had discussed me and my life on numerous occasions over the years. I asked her about the kids coming the following day, and she told me she had already talked to Susan and Mark, and they were happy that she was here for me. They did not want me to be alone either. I had another drink, and Dorothy had another glass of wine. It was different for both of us. When we entered the bedroom, Dorothy looked at me and said, I didn't get you anything for Christmas, but I'm all yours, if you want me. Update 1, for the first time in 25 years, I had love with someone other than my wife. I have to admit I was nervous, but I did all the things that Mary liked, hoping her sister felt the same. I looked down at Dorothy, and she had tears in her eyes. Are you okay? I asked. I'm more than okay. I feel wonderful, she replied. You're every bit the lover I thought you would be. Mary was a very lucky woman. We lay next to each other and soon fell asleep. When I woke the next morning, I was in bed alone, but could smell the perfume of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen. I got up, and Dorothy was peeling potatoes. She was already dressed and had on an apron. I let you sleep in since you opened your Christmas present last night. She was smiling at me. I poured a cup of fresh coffee and sat down when the phone rang. Dorothy answered it and said okay. After hanging up, she remarked, "The kids will be here in a half hour. You might want to get dressed and make the bed." She was smiling at me as she said it. The kids showed up, kissed their Aunt Dorothy and me. I saw Susan beaming at her. Dorothy stopped long enough in the kitchen to see the youngsters open their presents. Dorothy, Susan, and Christy went in the kitchen and continued making our regular breakfast. Dorothy offered to say grace, and we all had tears when she emphasized how much we all missed Mary. Final update. Over the next 2 months, we moved Dorothy into my house. Now, our house. We leased her house to a young family starting off. She left some of her furniture for them to use. Dorothy's kids were thrilled that we were together. It may sound unusual to a lot of other people, but we were two mature adults who loved each other and have known each other for years. Also, no more loneliness for any of us. We've talked about marriage, but it's still on the table. Our kids remark we are acting a lot like a young couple getting to know one other. Actually, they told us we were acting like 2 and 18-year-old youngsters discovering love for the first time. I merely told them, life moves on and I'm glad. I have a lovely woman with whom I enjoy sharing it. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.